presentation. But I will introduce them in the meantime. Thank you all for joining us today. Let me first introduce Jonathan Sadow from Google, followed by Sirlei Waterhouse from KO, then Nicole Mitchell from SSI, and Mike Billingsley from Research Now may still be outside. If somebody can check the Research Now booth. Thank you. We do have one panelist, Amy Raihill. She was supposed to join us. Unfortunately, she cannot make it due to some last-minute personal issues. However, we have some wonderful panelists here today. I'm sure they will engage you and hopefully energize you during this late hour. I see a lot of sleepy heads, so hopefully we can get going. And here, Mike's going to show us how to get going by running to the stage. Come on, Mike, you can do it. 30 minutes. Okay, no worries. And there are two mics on the table, folks, for those who heard the earlier panel. It's hard to hear, so please hold it. Yeah, pass those around. Thank you. Terrific. So it's hard to moderate a panel this late in the day because every question has been asked and discussed already. So I'm going to leave a lot of time for Q&A for you guys, for the audience. But let's start with talking about mobile. Obviously, that's what we're here to talk about. But it seems to me that there's a lot of focus on mobile, and yet I wonder, what's the big deal, right? I mean, we've had paper and pencil, we've had telephone, we've had online, and now we have mobile. Is mobile just the next stage in evolution, or is it really something different? Why all this focus on mobile?
I'll take that since I have the microphone. I think it's just the natural evolution of, as market researchers, we're always listening, trying to find ways to communicate with our respondents. So mobile is just the next way to gather insights on what they're thinking and feeling and stuff.
I'll take the next one. I think it's an evolution to go where our consumers are. But I also believe, and by seeing a lot of presentations today, is that it can go beyond and we can get a lot more data than we have been able to obtain traditionally. And whether it's more accurate in the sense of reflecting more of what our consumers are doing or less, I believe the first, but I think that's still one that we are discussing.
Yeah, sure. So the difference I would see, so when we caught on with online, there was kind of an evolution where we were able to kind of move into it at our own pace. You could still call people, you could still conduct research. With mobile, the hand's being forced a little bit. The adoption's happening so fast with the consumer that we have to react now and create experiences for people to get insights from them that make sense on their mobile device, whether that's a mobile phone or a tablet. And with Research Now, we like to look at that as kind of our defensive move. We have to adapt. The offensive opportunity is how can we do that and leverage that to now reach people in very unique ways and in a way that they're comfortable. It's an overused term, whether or not it's in the moment or it's convenient for them, or it's the behavioral data we can capture. So I like to look at it as part of it is something we need to do to adapt to the consumer, and part of it we do because there's many great opportunities now because we can reach people in a different way.
So, good point. And we just talked a little bit about online, and it seems to me that online gave us an opportunity because it's quicker to do a longer survey online. And as researchers, we have a negative stereotype for asking these long surveys. But online allowed that, right? We were able to ask more questions than we could have via the telephone. But now that we're onto mobile, is mobile going to be a handicap because we have less space and have to ask fewer questions, or is it more of an opportunity?
Well, I certainly don't like to look at it as a handicap. I think it is perceived that way a certain amount in the market. We understand the challenges that it's going to take to adapt certain types of research to start doing it in shorter chunks on mobile devices. But I do think that the opportunity way outgrows the challenge. I'll use length of survey as an example. That's usually the one that comes up. In our research, we've seen design being more important than length. So you constantly hear, how long of a survey can I do with the respondent on a mobile device? And we do think that there is a limit to that, but we're not sure that it's 10 questions, or we don't think it's 10 questions, 15 questions. we look at it based on more what the opportunity is. If it's a basic survey that you're trying to get feedback from someone, we think you can go past the 10-minute mark. We just think the design and how you deliver it to that respondent is important. If you're trying to get feedback from them in a store, then you might want to think about a different sort of length or a different sort of opportunity of how you interact with them.
Yeah, I agree. The design is important. The way that we currently think about how we design surveys, we need to kind of reach out and outside of the box. And, we typically look at, the text first. And then we actually need to start looking at the elements of the survey first and then designing around that. The length of time it takes people to take a survey on a mobile phone is a bit longer than on your laptop, desktop. Research shows it's, depending on if your survey is mobile friendly or mobile optimized. Mobile unfriendly surveys, can take a considerable amount of time. Our research has shown that it can take double the amount of time to complete the survey. So that design element is very important when creating your survey and thinking about the respondent and that.
Jonathan, as someone who focuses on length of survey.
Yeah, I guess I'm obligated to talk about the length of survey question coming from Google Consumer Surveys. So of course it's the #1 question we get because we impose a restriction on the number of questions we'll allow a respondent or ask a respondent to answer at once. I think for us, the real question that we face is why surveys have been designed in such a way over the last 40, 50 plus years. And you mentioned paper and pencil to phones to online. The challenge has been up until, let's say, the last decade, how do we find people? And more importantly, how do we find people that'll spend time talking to us? It used to be that if you could actually get someone to do a door-to-door interview, you were going to sit on their couch and ask them questions until they kicked you out. And now we can build a relationship with respondents through mobile where we can ask them to give us quite a lot more frequent information as opposed to trying to suck every answer they can get out at the moment when they're willing to give us that time. And I think when you combine that with some of the tools that mobile makes possible, all the different sort of passive information, location information, the types of inputs, imagery, things like that, you can actually get a lot more out of a few questions or more frequent questions and other inputs versus feeling like you have to hold on to that respondent as long as you can.
I'd like to build on what you're saying because I believe a picture is worth 1,000 words. So mobile snaps a picture instantly. So you get so much more information via images and via video. And I'm a qualitative person, so there's so much more information that you can get. It is just that we need to look at it differently. And we obtain so much more by having those capabilities.
Great. We'll come back to qualitative in a moment, but a few of you mentioned design. Do you think we'll get to the point where we'll have complex surveys like discrete choice and segmentation studies and so forth via mobile devices?
Yeah, so I definitely do, and the main reason is that I think we're going to have to get to a point where almost all of our surveys and research are being done on mobile devices. So the discrete choice and segmentation as specific examples, I'll put that aside for a second. It's just that we're going to be in a world where if you don't use mobile as your predominant outlet, there will be no other way to get in touch with folks because they won't be using desktop computers as the way that we know them today. Now, specifically with those examples, I mean, we do a lot of work with companies and research partners who are exploring lots of different types of data fusion and modeling and work with short surveys in a way that can sort of simulate the effects of what you'll get from a segmentation study and things like that. And so I think that kind of development is in its infancy. I think it's really early on, but there's a lot of smart ideas out there on how we can build and sort of put these building blocks together to get to the same data, even though we know people aren't going to sit and answer maybe a 60, 70 question segmentation study on their mobile phone.
No, I agree. I think we tend to focus just on mobile, but I also think it's focusing on multiple screens. I think the evolution right now is that we are trying to interact with people in different ways. So it's not just the focus, at least for us, it's not 100% mobile. It's like if I can catch someone digitally and they raise their hand and say, I'll take a survey, how do I serve up an interaction with them right then that makes sense? And we have done a lot of testing like discrete choice and things like that, but you need to make sure that it's something that's device agnostic that you can, it's not just about chunking the time together or the surveys together, it's also making sure that you can bring in different devices together on the same study to get the same results. Or not same results, get results that you understand. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and Jonathan alluded to it. You know, there's a trend, especially here in the U.S., of internet only being accessed through mobile, right? So that's certainly coming, where one day we'll have to do mobile. But thinking about today, I'm sure there are many client-side researchers here. Today, if you don't include mobile respondents, and you just go with the classic sort of desktop, laptop approach, are you setting yourself up for serious respondent bias issues?
Yes.
Agreed.
Well, take your time.
Agreed. I mean, eventually, as you stated, we're going to get to the point where, you know, you have people who only have smartphones and no longer have the laptop, desktop. So it's important to, you know, adopt now and, you know, recognize that, you know, people are going to are taking these surveys, you know, on mobile, and we need to think about this now instead of waiting till later.
Yeah, but I would argue the time is now. I mean,
Yeah.
I really do think it's not
agree.
something we should wait for. I think
Right.
that we're dealing with the moment right now where the traffic, the simple fact that the traffic that comes through to our site, which I would argue, other than Google, at least in the research agency, we handle as much traffic as anybody, and the numbers are overwhelming. People are coming through their mobile phones, not just a mobile device, but coming through on their mobile phones, and we're either A, screening them out, or B, we're giving them a really bad experience.
Right.
And I'm not a researcher, I'm a sales guy and a technology person, but my basic sense tells me that that's not helping your data out at all.
Yeah, just to put an example behind that, and I agree with both points. So one, as I see it very much, I think we see it at Google, and I think a lot of us up here feel the same way, that it's no different than if you're still running a phone poll for the elections and not sampling cell phones, which still happens. But generally speaking, I mean, it's very similar corollary. When we launched, and this is not meant to be the plug that it is, when we launched Google Opinion Rewards in November, which is our Android app, we immediately started testing what our overall validation scores looked like when we took in a percentage of our respondents for a given survey from the app. So, you know, we have our publisher network, we take data from the publisher network, we started bringing in some Android respondents, and our first validation study using that data was the closest to the benchmarks we'd ever run in 2 years. And so I think that's the apples to apples comparison. That's what shows that there's that certain slice of people who fit that demographic who were probably underrepresented in our existing web platform. And I'm sure that's similar across all mediums and panels and things like that.
I'm just going to take the other side just to represent the other side. And I think that to me, it depends on who we're going after, who our target is. So given that the mobile is devices that use more by the younger population, so when we are trying to get to older population, then maybe mobile is not the way to go.
Yeah, I think it's about multiple screen. I truly think it is finding the respondent where they want to take a survey, they raise their hand and get them a survey right that moment that they can take that makes sense for them. And mobile's a key part of that, but I do think we're you know, I don't think we fully understand. I always hear desktops, laptops are going to go away, but I think it's going to be an evolution of different access that we just need to think we need to be prepared for.
Great. So part of the title is challenges, and we've hit on that already, but sticking with this respondent bias issue for one more moment. If you're a client-side researcher, you probably have some trackers. You know, maybe the 20, 25-minute, God forbid, you know, A&U, for example. What are you supposed to do in terms of getting that shifted over to mobile, either completely or partially, and then if you can do it, what about those numbers? You know, whether they're quarterly or annually. How have you dealt with that, or what's a suggestion that you have for folks in the audience?
Well, I do think you have to run side by side. There needs to be a process of understanding that data. The data will be different. I think you have to look hard at a tracker and determine if it's something that's been running for a long time. It's been my experience. There's probably a lot of questions that have been added in over time. And you really should look at it and say, do I need every piece of that data that's coming through? But the simplest way I really know how to do it is you have to make the investment in the time, whether that's money and time, to really look at it side by side over time under, you know, a period that you feel comfortable with, and understand what those differences in data are, and then start bringing it together after that.
Yeah, that would be my suggestion too, would do a parallel study to look at the differences and then go from there. We know that if you make that survey mobile friendly and you include those mobile respondents that you may be missing, the data is going to be different, but then over time, you'll start to see it, it'll get to that point where you're able to include all those people and be able to reach people based on how they want you to reach out to them.
I think there's two components. I think the first thing is you actually have to want to make the change, and I think that's the most difficult part in this industry and in many industries, is that you have to buy in that tracker is not going to last forever. I mean, you don't replace your roof after it. You don't want to replace your roof after it leaks. You want to replace it before it leaks. And I think what we might find is if you wait, if we're right, and in a few years the predominant form of accessing the internet is through mobile, which I think every trend points to. Eventually, you're going to have to move your tracker. And the question is, when do you want to do that? Do you want to start to do it now? And it's sort of a cautious way with side-by studies and learning as you go? Or do you want to have to do it at the very last minute when you realize that it's too late? The only thing I'll add to that is we talk to a lot of clients, and we also talk to a lot of sort of other research suppliers and partners. And the biggest thing is just to have the conversation between both entities, because a lot of the time the research firms and agencies are learning how to do this kind of work, how to build these parallel trackers, how to migrate that study, and the clients want to do that, and they're not communicating about how to go about doing it because they're sort of both tiptoeing around the status quo. And so what we often try to do is push both sides to talk to each other and say, all right, let's take the learnings you have from all of your clients, apply it to us, or can we push you forward? And so that communication, I think, is really key.
Great. So there's been a lot of talk earlier in the panel, as well as today, as well as throughout our industry, about behavioral data, location-based data, geofencing, all the great things that can be accomplished via mobile. I personally haven't seen the promise of that fulfilled yet. So what I want to ask the panel, frankly, is it going to happen? Are we just in the infancy and it's going to happen in the next 18 months, in your opinion? Or is the hype outselling the reality? What do you think?
I'm sorry. I definitely think it's going to happen. It's in its infancy, and we've actually through the different presentations we've seen people are using it. So it's definitely something that is going to happen. It's not just like a myth or that the untouchable or something like that. So it's definitely it's happening, and more people are using. The challenges of the geolocation or some of the challenges, just like the accuracy of geolocation, is if you're looking to go after a large retailer like Walmart and say you want to know those people that are coming out of the Walmart store and you can hit them up with a survey, the challenge to that is, what about the kiosk in the mall where you are surrounded by surveys and that GPS location is not as accurate? So I think that's one of the challenges with geolocation that may have some people hesitant, but it's definitely it's in its infancy, but it's definitely coming, and it's going to move forward.
So when we look at behavioral, which we're doing a lot of behavioral work now, and I think the way to define behavioral, so if you have to look at the million people that we have cookied, that's a behavioral aspect. We're understanding the ads they see. We're understanding the websites they go to. We have 50,000 meters on PCs. We have 10,000 meters on mobile devices. Our basic app has about 100,000 people that we're tracking their location. To me, it's the technologies are there and they're ready. Geofencing is improved greatly. There's a lot of data out there now that has rooftop that we can work with. So I would say, I'd kind of use your point. It's really about, are you ready to make that decision? Are you ready to start testing it? We're governing our growth, meaning we're following the growth of the business, growth of the market out there. So I think we are ready. I think respondents are more than happy to do it on mobile devices. I think all of us probably use location services at some level on their location, on their mobile device, whether or not it's checking in or using Google Maps or really any of those. So we find on a fully opted-in basis that people, not every respondent, but most respondents are comfortable with location if they download the app, and many of them are comfortable with just tracking things like the apps they use, the websites they visit, and So I would say that data is becoming more democratized, where in the past it's been kind of in black boxes with certain companies. They've used that data to this date, but now it's becoming more and more available to other research firms to use.
Yeah, Mike touched on this a little bit. I think the first thing that stands out to me is the privacy component and the transparency component. I agree. I think generally most people are comfortable giving that information or sharing that information. I think it all starts with being clear to them what you're asking for. And as long as the respondent knows what it is that you're trying to track or ask them for or get data on from them, then it's fair game. And I think that helping sort of train respondents and participants in research will help us all over time, because that opt-in is going to grow as long as people feel like they're being sort of dealt with evenly. The other thing for us is it's all about scale. And for us, one of our goals over the next couple of years is we want to make it to go well beyond the Walmart example, which is sort of a very relevant example probably to a lot of folks in this room. We want to make it so that the mom and pop shop down the street can do a satisfaction study when someone walks out the door, or when they walk in the door, or something in the aisle. That's really a difficult thing to do, and that's where it all comes back to scale. I mean, we've had our app about 6 months. We've got about a little more than 500,000 users. Which, in terms of, comparison to other Android or even just app-based panels is pretty big. But we want to and need to get to 5, 10, 15 million users before we can actually pinpoint a geolocation around something that isn't Walmart or Target or one of the big box stores. And that's where I think this becomes really valuable, not just to researchers, but to businesses. So it'll happen, but the scale's got to come first from a respondent perspective.
I think from my perspective, being I'm going to call a client of a lot of the data, the question, especially on geolocation, is how useful is it? How is it going to impact my business? So I can see it from a store, from a location, but from my perspective, being a consumer good product, distributed in mass market, I guess I haven't figured out exactly how it's going to impact the business. So I think that is still, people are going to start using it and begin to show examples, and I do agree that eventually it's going to get there, but I think the hesitance is there. There's so much more other aspects that I think are going to help us, and mobile is part of it. It's just that part of it I'm not so sure yet.
Great. I have a couple other questions, but I do want to give the audience plenty of opportunity. You have a number of suppliers here who all focus on mobile, so this is your chance for your most pointed, most challenging questions of the day. Get it out now, because they're sitting here waiting for you. So, any questions? Don't be shy. I see one over there. Is there a microphone going on? Thank you.
I'm going to try to wing it, do it without the microphone. Can you hear me? I guess I will use the microphone. My name's Dan Jacob. I'm from Zitter Health Insights, and I'm mostly interested in the ways that patients as consumers make healthcare decisions, deep granular decisions as they navigate their healthcare journey. And I actually have two slightly related questions for the panelists. One is about limited English proficiency. How do you survey patients for whom, in this country, for whom English is not their first language? And how you adapt survey content for them? And the second question is whether any of you have experimented with the use of IVR technology via a mobile device for the slightly older demographic that you mentioned earlier, who may not be as facile taking a survey using a mobile device. Thank you.
Sure. In terms of people who English isn't their first language, we would recommend, translating the survey. I'm sorry, what was the second question? IVR? Well, yeah, we actually offer, we actually have a for example, we have a Spanish-speaking panel. So they're recruited in, Spanish, so the survey will be offered in both English and Spanish. So that way, those people that are coming in that are Spanish speakers, you know, it's not that they're getting an English survey and they don't understand. So we're offering them the opportunity in a language that they can relate to. So.
You know, I think the first question you really hit on a weak spot. And I know it's a weak spot for us to a certain extent, and I think it has been digitally in many ways, and a lot of that's been driven for us, and it's not like we haven't tried, I can tell you that. But we've struggled with the lack of adoption of online, and I'll use unacculturated Hispanics as an example in this country. And the fact that they weren't big adopters of online to date, but what we do see in the data is that they're big adopters of mobile devices. So I think what you've done is identify an opportunity, the one that we as a company really haven't jumped on yet, but we do see as a big opportunity. Now, how we interact with them, I think, is an incredible point, because I do think too often as companies we take the standard approach of how we touch every single person we interact with. So I don't know that I have the answer, but I do think that that's a fabulous opportunity. I think the IVR piece is something that we're beginning to test. We not only see that, we haven't tested it in terms of specific segments in the US, but we think globally, when you move into, because I think one opportunity we really haven't talked about too much is the opportunity in developing countries with mobile devices. And there is a big focus on Android, but you know, the data and the understanding we have is there's still a lot of variation based on the country you go to and the type of device. And so we do think that IVR is going to have a play in some of these developing countries as a way to, yes, you can now reach that person, but you may not be able to reach them on a device that creates a good survey experience. So you know, I think that's going to move slower. We might be using text too. I know that a lot of the companies that are moving into developing countries still use text, but I do think IVR is a great way to go with certain segments.
We haven't tried anything with IVR, maybe eventually. And then similar style, right? So we can do Spanish language and bilingual targeting to our Android users. We ask them when they sign up what languages they can speak fluently. We test and validate their capabilities in those languages, and we target them that way. And we don't do any questionnaire design or translation yet, but it's an additional need, right? It's one thing to have the population, another to actually put something in front of them they understand. So.
Other questions? Hands in the back.
Hello, my name is Alice Sylvester. We heard a lot this afternoon about text surveys, and I'm wondering if you have any experiences and best practices to bear on how to ensure that the consumer experience is a rewarding one in context when we interrupt them while they're having dinner or we interrupt them on their frantic trip to the grocery store. So how have you taken on that job of ensuring that the consumer experience is rewarding and they're willing to do it again?
Well, I don't know that we're doing a fabulous job just yet. I mean, I think we're still taking the current survey process that we have and attempting to adapt it in a way that fits the screen, that is engaging enough to where, at least in terms of, so you use two examples of trying to capture people in the moment, because we segment it. I talked about length of survey. We kind of segmented about what is the expectation of the survey. Is it something they're going to be doing when they're static? Is there something they're going to be doing when they're in location? Is it predisposed in location, meaning did we recruit them and ask them to go to location, or did we trigger a survey to them with geofencing and surprise them with it? So we kind of look at all those differently. But I think there's a lot of improvements to be able to how we're capturing insights with respondents. We're looking at some implicit research. In fact, we're testing something right now where we're looking at capturing the emotional aspect from respondents in the moment, not by asking them questions. Now we're combining that with questions. I would say that capture of video and images can really be a qualitative piece too. But I think we have a long way to go to improve that process. Most of the survey tools now are getting much better at optimizing, but I don't see a lot of research or a lot of technology out there yet that really does a lot around the gaming experience.
Any other questions?
Hi, I'm Kristen Devers with American Greetings, and I did live through the transitioning of trackers from phone to online, and I've tried to block a lot of that out. So just thinking about like just an ad hoc study for simplicity. Trying to make a survey available to people in the way they want to take it so that we help with response rates and experience. If you have a survey, assuming it's been optimized for mobile, if you let them take it, some do it online through a laptop, some do it through mobile, have you compared responses to see if like response patterns look different? Can you combine the data? Things like that.
Well, they're different. I mean, we've done a fair amount of research, and I can't give you all the specifics on what the differences are right now. But there are differences. We see differences from mobile device, tablet, computer, touchscreen versus not touchscreen. So, I mean, it's something that you're going to have to work with and understand how to bring that all back together to make a full understanding. But I don't think we want to sit here and say that there's not differences, because we do see big differences.
Yeah, we do too. I think the one thing I'll pick out from what you said is that I think the key is that well, and I'm going to talk about, I'll talk tomorrow about mobile optimization versus respondent optimization. I think the key is as soon as you start thinking about it as mobile optimized, you sort of pigeonholed this platform, and you've seen it as this secondary research outlet. Now you have your desktop research and your mobile research, and now you're juggling 2 research streams in addition to everything else that you're doing, which I think makes it much more complicated. Our view, and a lot of other platforms are starting to do the same thing or have been doing the same thing, is you write one survey, and you should have the expectation, I think, from us, that we should figure out how to put that in front of each user in the right way. If you want a GenPop sample, we do that on our web sample, and we grab some people from mobile that fill that out. If you want a mobile sample, we'll put it on mobile. But you shouldn't have to take on the burden of taking your longer survey, turning it into a mobile optimized version, having a desktop version, taking the data, fusing it back together. Now, we still see some differences. We see different length of open-ended responses. We see some different participation in multi-select questions on web versus on mobile. But you should have expectations, I think, of suppliers and technology platforms to make it really easy for you to give them a single survey that just works everywhere you put it. Mike's talked a lot about multi-screen. I think we think about that very similarly. If you get in the business of thinking about desktop surveys, tablet surveys, mobile surveys, I can only imagine how confusing and difficult it's going to be, because everything's going to look different on the going out and coming back in.
I think that's one of the things that we want to be able to do, is to make sure that the experience across device is the same, so that you don't run into that problem where you're getting people who are, you have a laptop desktop experience, a mobile respondent experience, and tablet experience. But what you want to do is take one survey and then make it so that it's something that is the same across every single device, and you're not trying to stitch together and figure out what are the different mode biases from each one. It's one survey, and then you just make it work from there.
Terrific conversation. I'm being told that we're out of time. Was there a follow-up that I missed in the audience? Great. Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists.